Giuseppe "Joe the Boss" Masseria was an early mafia boss in New York City. He was boss of what is now called the Genovese crime family, one of the New York Mafia's 5 families, from 1922 to 1931. He waged a bloody war to take over the criminal activities in NYC, gaining considerable power for himself. He was killed in 1931. Early days, Giuseppe Masseria was born in Menfi, in the province of Agrigento, Sicily. He arrived in America in 1902 after he fled a murder charge in Sicily. He was part of the Morello crime family that operated out of Harlem and parts of Little Italy in southern Manhattan. Masseria was contemporaries with other captains from that original Mafia Famiglia such as Salvatore D'Aquila and Gaetano Reina. The man who can dodge bullets. As the 1910s ended, Masseria and D'Aquila became rivals for power in New York. By the early 1920s, they were at war with each other. D'Aquila had a vicious gunman under him, Umberto Valenti, who was given the assignment to kill Masseria as a way to conclude this power struggle. On August 9, 1922, Masseria walked out of his apartment at 82nd Avenue, and was rushed by 2 armed men who opened fire on him. Masseria ducked into a store at 82nd Avenue with the gunmen in pursuit. They shot out the front window and shot up the inside of the store, but then ran out of bullets. The gunmen fled across 2nd Avenue to a getaway car idling just around the corner on E 5th Street. The car was a Hudson Cruiser, which like many cars of the era had running boards along the sides. The gunmen jumped on the running boards and the car sped west on E 5th Street towards the Bowery, guns blazing. A ladies' garment industry union meeting had just ended, and dozens of laborers were milling in the street. When they heard the shots and saw the speeding cruiser coming down the street, they tried to stop them. The gunmen then plowed through the crowd and shot randomly at the blockade, hitting 6 and killing 2, plus a horse. Masseria survived the point-blank hit attempt unscathed and was found by police in his upstairs bedroom shell-shocked. He was sitting up in his bed dazed, his ears were ringing from the proximity of the weapon fire, and there were 2 bullet holes through his straw hat, which he was still wearing on his head. This incident gained Masseria new respect among superstitious Italian gangsters as the man who can dodge bullets, and his reputation began to rise as D'Aquila's began to wane. Morello leadership. The following month, Masseria arranged for a peace meeting with Umberto Valenti and newly released from prison, Giuseppe Morello, hinting that he was prepared to give up his aspirations to being the boss. Valenti and 3 of his supporters arrived at the restaurant and were met by 3 of Masseria's men. The men chatted amiably for some time until Valenti realized that it was a setup, Masseria was not coming, that Masseria and Morello had reached some sort of deal and Valenti was the odd man out. Everyone went for their guns and started shooting. 2 of Valenti's men went down and he made a run for it. The Masseria men gave chase but their aim was poor, and the next casualties were a street cleaner and an 8-year-old girl. Valenti jumped onto the running board of a passing taxi and began to return fire. Seeing their quarry about to escape, one of the pursuers took careful aim and dropped Valenti dead in the street. This gunman was always rumored to be Charles Lucky Luciano. Masseria now became head of the Morello family with Giuseppe Morello as his consigliere or counselor. This may have fit in well with Morello's desire to avoid attracting undue police attention. He was safer taking on a secondary role behind the overt leader. One of the favorite Masseria family hangouts was Venezia Restaurant on East 116th Street in East Harlem, Manhattan. Joe the Boss. The death of Frankie Yale in July 1928 appears to have been the catalyst for Joe Masseria's ambition to become overall leader of all the mafia gangs of New York. In October 1928, Toto D'Aquila, the boss of bosses now more in name than in actual status, was killed by Morello and others. D'Aquila was accosted in the street by 3 men after his regular visit to the doctor. The discussion became heated and one of the men drew a gun and shot D'Aquila dead. There was known to be bad blood between D'Aquila and the Masseria gang, possibly arising out of resentment over D'Aquila's rise to the position of capo consigliere within the New York Mafia, which had coincided with the decline in the fortunes of the Morello family. Alfred Mineo and his enforcer Steve Frigno, allies of Joe Masseria, then took over leadership of the Daculla family. In June 1929, Ciro Terranova was questioned in connection with the murder of Frankie Marlowe. Marlowe was last seen having dinner with Terranova the night he was shot to death. As a fellow Sicilian, Marlowe may have been approached, on behalf of the new Union Sicilian president, with requests that he pay tribute or otherwise comply with the wishes of Joe Masseria. As Frankie Marlowe was a leading figure in the New York crime scene, he would certainly have dismissed any such advances. Perhaps he was guilty of underrating the seriousness of the threat posed by the old-fashioned Morelos and paid the ultimate price. Ballistics evidence has shown that the bullets that killed Marlowe were fired by a submachine gun owned by Al Capone's Chicago outfit, and that the same weapon was also used in the killing of Yale and for the St. Valentine's Day massacre. The weapon eventually came into the hands of the authorities after the arrest of Freddie Oe Killer Burke, a St. Louis, Missouri gunman who participated in the St. Valentine's Day plot. Masseria then moved in on what had been Yale's organization, and Anthony Calfano, Little Augie Pisano, became head of the Yale family. Calfano's group retained control of Yale's gambling and bootlegging interests. However, it may have been at this time that the waterfront racket was reallocated and came under the control of the Daculla family, headed by Mineo. Joe Masseria was now Joe the Boss, head of the largest mafia grouping in New York. Other Sicilian gangsters who were not yet part of his empire, such as ice racketeer and Bronx Mafia boss Gaetano Tom Rayner, took note of what had happened to Daculla and Marlowe and soon began to pay homage. The imperial gaze of Joe the Boss now fell upon the Broadway mob, and he identified Charles Lucky Luciano as the logical recipient of his demands for homage and tribute. This was because Luciano was the only Sicilian member of that group. Frank Costello and Albert Anastasia were Calabrian, Joe Adonis and Vito Genovese were from Naples, and Meyer Lansky and Bugsy Siegel were Jewish. Luciano had little interest in the rites and rituals of secret societies, and he initially found the attentions of the traditional mafiosi irritating. However, it was an irritation he could not afford to ignore. Eventually he would come to see the accident of his birthplace as a stroke of good fortune. The Mafia were the most exclusionist of the major ethnic crime groupings, and it added to his value amongst his allies that he could wield authority over them by virtue of being seen as one of them, while his other friends would always be seen as inferior outsiders. The Castellammarese War. Masseria next began to put pressure on a Mafia family known as the Castellammarese from Sicily. Nicola Cola Squared, the group's official leader, turned out to be a weak man, nothing more than the avatar of more senior men elsewhere. He paid Masseria $10,000 and then went into hiding, although in fact he was never heard from again. After the disappearance of Cola Squared, Joe the Boss attempted to install his own candidate as the new leader, as he had with the other families. He supported Joe Parano. However, Parano was soon shot to death in a restaurant. Instead, Squared's place as leader was taken by Salvatore Maranzano. Maranzano was sent with several other men from Sicily in 1927 to gain control of the American Mafia for Don Vito Cascioferro. Masseria issued a decree ordering the death of Maranzano. This event marks the formal beginning of the Castellammarese War. Death. On April 15, 1931, Joe Masseria was assassinated at one of his favorite restaurants, Nuova Villa Tamaro in Coney Island. Gangland legend has it that Masseria dined with Charles Lucky Luciano before his death. While they played cards, Luciano excused himself to the bathroom, when Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, Vito Genovese, Albert Anastasia and Joe Adonis rushed in and shot Masseria to death, his four bodyguards having mysteriously disappeared. The New York Daily News reported that the boss died with the ace of spades, the death card, clutched in a bejeweled paw. However, both the New York Times and the New York Herald Tribune paint a different picture. Neither newspaper mentions Luciano being present, although Luciano was brought in for questioning by the police. The Herald Tribune reported that Masseria arrived at the restaurant in his armored steel car in the company of three other men shortly before 3 p.m. Anna Tamaro, mother-in-law of owner Gerardo Scarpato, waited while they played cards. According to two eyewitnesses, Two well-dressed young men drove up and parked their car at the curb. They strolled leisurely into the restaurant, and the shooting began immediately. Some 20 shots were fired. The two gunmen then exited, and without any visible signs of haste, entered their automobile and drove away. Masseria was hit with 4 bullets in the back and 1 in the back of the head, identified as .32 and .38 caliber. In an alley next to the restaurant, police recovered 2 revolvers. The 2010 book New York City Gangland offers an eyewitness account of events surrounding Masseria's murder, which also involves owner Scarpetto, who was allegedly extorting money from a small businessman who unexpectedly arrived by car at the Villa Tomaro on April 15, 1931. "As soon as I reached the place," wrote the businessman to the Brooklyn district attorney, "Scarpetto ran over and asked me what I was doing there. Scarpetto told me to leave right away and not mention to anyone I had been there that day. I left. Late that night, I read that Joe Masseria had been shot at the Villa Tomaro. This was my first taste of what these men were capable of." In popular culture, the character of Masseria appears in the movies Lucky Luciano and Mobsters and the television drama series Boardwalk Empire, where he is portrayed by actor Ivo Nandi, and the television docudrama The Making of the Mob, New York, where he is portrayed by Stelio Savanti. References. Further reading: Bernstein, Lee. The Greatest Menace, Organized Crime in Cold War America. Boston, UMass Press, 2002. ISBN 1-55849-345-X, Bonanno, Joseph. A Man of Honor, The Autobiography of Joseph Bonanno. New York, St. Martin's Press, 2003. ISBN 0-312-97923-1, Capeci, Jerry. The Complete Idiot's Guide to the Mafia. Indianapolis, Alpha Books, 2002. ISBN 0-02-864225-2, Critchley, David. The Origin of Organized Crime, The New York City Mafia, 1891–1931. New York, Routledge, 2008. Mike. The First Family, Terror, Extortion and the Birth of the American Mafia. London, Simon & Schuster, 2009. Davis, John H. Mafia Dynasty, The Rise and Fall of the Gambino Crime Family. New York, HarperCollins, 1993. ISBN 0-06-016357-7, Kobyla, John. Capone, The Life and Times of Al Capone. New York, Da Capo Press, 2003. ISBN 0-306-81285-1, Mannion, James. 101 Things You Didn't Know About the Mafia, The Lowdown on Dons, Wise Guys, Squealers and Backstabbers. Avon, Massachusetts, Adams Media, 2005. ISBN 1-59337-267-1, Messick, Hank. Lansky. London, Robert Hale and Company, 1973. ISBN 0-7091-3966-7, Milhon, H. Thomas. Crime, Computer Viruses to Twin Towers. Boca Raton, Florida, Universal Publishers, 2005. ISBN 1-58112-489-9, Peterson, Robert W. Crime and the American Response. New York, Facts on File, 1973. ISBN 0-87196-227-6, Ferrara, Eric. Gangsters, Murderers and Weirdos of the Lower East Side. A Self-Guided Walking Tour 2008, Papernia, Tom. In Search of a Father. 2006. ISBN 9780620410281. External links. New York City Gangland by Arthur Nash, The American Mafia Who Was Who? Giuseppe Masseria, Gangrel.com Biography and Autopsy Details, Spartacus Educational, Tom Papernia, Masseria grandson claims Luciano assassinated Masseria on YouTube. Joe Masseria at Encyclopedia Britannica, Joe Masseria at Find a Grave.